Okay, welcome to this evening lecture, and I will talk about know thyself. These words are inscripted above the entrance to the temple in Delphi, and the whole sentence is, know thyself and you will know the gods and the universe. And we don't really know who said them the first time. Maybe it was Socrates or Pythagoras or some other Greek philosopher. But since this time, many philosophers have thought about what does it mean really? What does it mean to know thyself, to really know thyself? And this is what I will try to this evening to dissecate somehow with the help of Martinus, of course. So I start with, am I this body? And somehow it feels really obvious that I'm not this body. I had, when I was 5 years old, I had a very different body, but it was still the same I that had this body. And I think the same thing I can say about my thoughts. My feelings, they change all the time. I'm not my thoughts. I have thoughts, and I have feelings, and I have memories, and I have a lot of things in my consciousness, in my thought world. But all this is something that I have. But what is this thing that has all these things? And then we come into this a bit difficult, investigation. Somehow it feels that this is something that I am. And maybe that's the only thing I can say. I am. I am someone who has a body. If I didn't have it, you couldn't see me, and I couldn't see you either. So we have a body to see each other, to know that we are there. And I have thoughts and feelings, and you also have. I can't see them really. But what I really not can see is your I, the deepest self inside of you. And you can't see mine either. But I'm going to try to talk about it so that we more and more can have a feeling or a connection somehow to this innermost self in us. Yeah, let's start with this is the mystery of life, the symbol that Martinus has made, and where he describes this symbol and the content of it in the Livets book number 3. He has this symbol to show us everything we need, and he calls it the incontestable solution to the mystery of life itself. And then he says, when the advanced researcher meditates upon himself. And there he really recommends us to meditate on ourselves, on our self, our inner I. What is it and where is it? And we can't really see it, we can't touch it, and we can't hear it, but somehow we have a feeling there must be something that has all these abilities and has this life experience. And this is the one that we are going to look for. It's actually, if you see the lowest of these 12 star-shaped things, there we have this triangle, the white triangle, which is sometimes the I in us in Martinus symbols, and sometimes also the triune principle. So it can be both. But that's the whole solution goes on then, so that we also can see how everything is connected. And it ends with everything is good. So that's also, I think, what we are hoping to get at. That which experiences life, and that which also creates, because we also create our experiences and our lives. The source of life, we could also call it. And Martinus has this beautiful description, the divine something. The fixed point. He has many ways to describe it, but in a way he says there is no way to describe it really. You have to feel it, to connect with it inside of you. So we'll see what he writes here in the beginning of this explanation. And we will now, with support of the symbol, fix in our minds this all-encompassing solution to the riddle of life, and from there in our hearts and our consciousness. For having once understood this symbol's speech, the researcher will never again be able to be the same being as he was before this understanding. So it seems to be a very important thing to meditate on this, and it seems like we will change totally. And I think maybe one of the things that we get from this meditation is something that is inside of us, that is always there. It has never started, and it will never end. It can't die. It can't be hurt. It just is there, like a background. But the most important thing, actually, in us, because this is really the source of life. And I think it's what we do mostly when we study the analysis of Martinus and the symbols. We start with our mind, of course, with our intelligence. And we try to get it together somehow. And this symbol you have to read many times to really get into the depth of it. But then it has to go into our hearts, he says. And that, he has also a word, you have to know it with your soul, maybe it can be translated. You have to really know it, and you have to really have it in your consciousness as something that belongs to you somehow. It's difficult to find words for this, but how can you describe this that you can't see and can't hear, and sometimes maybe from the outside it can be defined as nothing, but from the inside it's everything in us somehow. So, yeah, maybe that's the thing that changes us, that we are eternal beings, that we can never die. I guess that's one of the most important things that we discover in this investigation. And later on in this book, he writes, and this divine something that is or the I, the analysis of which is in itself the simplest and easiest of anything in existence. For nothing can have a simpler analysis than just this, to consist merely of something that is, and at the same time have absolutely no other analysis. This will at times seem to the one who is beginning to investigate these matters the most difficult and incomprehensible concept that he has ever come across. And I don't know, we are all on different levels on this investigation, but I think for most people, we never really think about the I. Well, I do this and I think this and my name is, and so on. We have this. We are so used to being in the outer world. We are so not used to be in the innermost source of our life experience. And we have to get used, he says, we have to get used to this, that we can't get at it somehow, not with our hands, but there's something inside of us that we have to try at least. And he goes on writing like this. Well, it's easier to read here for me. His question, what is life? And it is the inadequacy of these sensory reactions or ordinary experience in answering the question that inevitably leads the researcher towards the existence of the impalpable something, giving him the satisfaction, no satisfaction, until he has, with his senses, come into complete contact with this something. With our senses come into complete contact. What does it mean? Because we can't really sense it, he says. With our physical senses, we can't get at it. But there's something else in us that can somehow, we can have the contact with this something, the divine something. And there's one more from this text here. This something is therefore in reality the unknown and visible goal of the researcher. It is absolutely necessary to reach this goal in order to receive the revelation of the solution to the mystery of life, and for the individual to experience his own highest identity as an immortal son of God, and to have the sense of being one with God. So here it also sounds that it's really important for us to find this, to have the sense of being one with God. We can say it, but can we really sense it inside of our heart and our consciousness? I think that's what we are all more or less working on. Maybe we are also interested in other things in the cosmology, but this is really the deepest part of it all. And this, maybe it's what's called awakening. There are so many wise people on the YouTube who talk about this awakening. We have to be aware of this. And I think it's actually this that they are talking about, more or less having this feeling that we are eternal inside of us, that there is something that is always there and always will be there. And it is our connection to life and also to God in a way. So, and they call it enlightenment, which I guess is a stage far beyond, before you get the cosmic consciousness. And actually, I think only people who are studying Martinus cosmology know, or at least think they know what the cosmic consciousness is, like Edley tried this morning to describe it, because it's really difficult for us to know what is cosmic consciousness, because it's so far away from the way we experience life and the universe. And I think what happens is that you look in a different way at life. When you are more inside of here, it's like you have, in a way, a distance to everything that happens. You're not so involved in all these troublesome things, even if you can't be excluded at all from it. But it's more easy somehow to let things happen in life, to follow the flow of life and so on. It's like you are in here and all these things around you happen inside of me also, maybe. So it's a way of having a distance to everything that happens. But at the same time, it can also be the other way around, that it makes us feel so close with everything else. Because this I is everywhere, in all of you, and it's in all my organs, in all my cells, in all my atoms. It's in the earth, it's in the sun, solar system, and it's everywhere, really. So in a way, it's also this, well, I'm part of everything somehow. Those two things, experiences, I think, we can also recognize maybe more and more. And it also becomes you feel very confident that life is good. I mean, that everything is good, we can't really say it yet, but in the big whole picture, the cosmic view, everything is the way it should be. And it's fine the way it is, and it's changing all the time. The only thing that isn't changed is this I inside of us. So it's also a way to approach life in a different way. Yeah. The divine self. And he also says it's eternity inside of us, and that life is a now. And I've also heard another philosopher say it the other way around. But something now is really just now, and eternity, we think it's long like this, but it's something else that is actually the I, the inner self. And here is a way to describe it. It's a center of stillness surrounded by silence. This is written by Dag Hammarskjöld. He was a general secretary of the United Nations in the 50s. And he was really busy in all this. But then when he was alone at home, he wrote things and thoughts about, and he was really almost like a mystic, and having also this somehow connection to the God, to in himself and around him. And I think also like this meditation where you just go inside yourself and you let everything else out, and you just go in, and you don't look at the organs and the cells and those things. It's far deeper behind everything actually that is in there. But there is something, I can't see it, but I know it's there somehow. And it doesn't mean that I have cosmic consciousness. I just become aware that there is this eternal thing inside of me. And I think that's why in New York they built this United Nations big building, and he also ordered that there should be a room for meditation and for all religions. So it should really be open for all religions, and the United Nations is really a start of having this big one in the world. Yeah, it's also, maybe it's a good way to describe it. Everything else is moving and changing, but this is still, and this is actually what is needed. That's how Martinus describes this. We need something that is not changing all the time, otherwise we cannot have a life experience. So it is really very still and surrounded by silence when we can take ourselves in there. And I think that's also something you can practice on it. And I think this kind of meditation is not dangerous. I think it's really what he wants us to do. It's like a prayer in a way, also without words, just being inside there. And there are others who have tried to describe this. This is the basic ideas of the secret doctrine by Purucker. He's inspired by Blavatsky's Theosophy, and he describes it like this. Know yourself. Why? Because man's innermost being has its root in the innermost being of the universe. And by following the narrow ancient path inward, man can eternally climb upward step by step, i.e. ever further inward, while he is constantly expanding his consciousness in an ever larger field of consciousness. So it's up and inward and outwards, somehow everywhere. This is also a way to describe this. And another way, I think also is really old words that are maybe in all different parts of the world. The way to describe it, a circle whose center is everywhere and the periphery nowhere. And we can't really imagine a circle where the center is everywhere and the periphery is nowhere. So what is that? That's where we are left somehow to this inner, to have this fixed point. And now we are going to look at a circle where the middle is everywhere, the center, but there is a periphery in this symbol, but it's only a symbol. It's really Martinus, this one of the most important of his symbols, the eternal world picture. And it's also called the living being too. There's the first one, and this is the second one, and the eternal Godhead and the eternal sons of God. And he cannot really let it go out all through over the whole universe. So he has to make a circle to show how everything works together. And this is maybe the best way to describe this thing that is so difficult to describe, the Godhead and the sons of God, the white star in the middle, And that's not either the eye really, but it's symbolized by this white. And now it's a star that shines out in all directions. And we see the eye is also everywhere around in the whole universe, in the whole, all there is somehow. And this is actually the same eye in all of us and also in the Godhead. And what he now makes is he gives us these principles. The spiral is a principle. That's the way we can have an eternal life experience. We have to go into the darkness. We don't see it so much here, but we know it's here in the animal kingdom, the darkest part, and the lightest part is in the divine world on the other side. So we go through darkness into light and from light into darkness. That's also a way for us to have an eternal life experience. And then the Godhead has contact with all these eyes because they are actually in him or her or it, whatever you want to say. And they are everywhere. So in all these kingdoms and places where we have different life experience in these 6 different kingdoms, there are all these living beings that are all the time in contact with the light that shines out from the middle here. And then there is also actually the same light here also in every living being, in different energies are involved in it. But the reaction between the rays that come out in all directions and the rays that come in from all directions, from all the eyes, that's where our physical and spiritual world is created. It's a collaboration between the eye of God and our eyes and our energies that shine out in all directions. So we are all the time we are the thing that the Godhead can experience life through us. And we can also experience life through what we meet. And actually we meet the rays from God everywhere, all around us and inside of us. The eye and the eye. And the experience of the Godhead is maybe a bit different from what we have. Maybe when we are in the divine world, the experience is very similar, because that, I think, is where we feel the most that we are one with God. But already now, we can have this sense, I'm part of God somehow. God is in me, and I am in God. Yeah, and then I guess I could also say a bit about this, how we experience God through the instinct energy in the plant kingdom. It's very instinctive, and also when we become animals and primitive human beings, it's very instinctive, carried by the instinct energy. So we don't have to think so much about it. It just is there. We know there is a God somehow, but we don't know really how, and we don't have that much intelligence really. In this part, we go through this really materialistic. We want to be ourselves. We don't need this God. We can do everything ourselves. Like small children also have this period when they are 2 or 3, but we also have been through this, I guess. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But then it changes. Then we experience God more through the feeling. And it could be also, I don't know where the borders are, because we have this, that God is outside of us for a while. That's the Christian God somehow. But many now feel that God is also inside of us. It can't be like this. And more, I guess, when we come into where the intuition is dominating, we know again that we are one with God, and we know it with our whole consciousness somehow. I'm not going to say more about that because there is so much else you can say also. But I want also to show this symbol. Here it's the other way around. God is somehow up there, the white triangle, and one of us is there with a physical body and a physical in a physical world, but also with a consciousness that is with spiritual energies. And the connection, this is what he wants to show us, that we are always connected to God. But we have been through this materialistic period where we somehow have locked up, because we were so into being individual again. We have been so much one with God. Now we want to be ourselves. And I guess this is also important, but it can also be too much, that we become egoistic, and you know what's happening in the world right now. A lot of people are going through that phase. But then we come to this experience that we are actually connected all the time. And this, like a channel, maybe you could say it here, and the mother energy from the father creates the son. Maybe we could see that also. And I like to do this. I imagine when I stand and do Qigong, I do this movement where you stand like this, and then you open your arms. And then I usually say when I teach, you take the sunshine, the light from the sun, but you can also imagine God's energy coming down through the top of the head, and this light goes all through my body, all the way down into the earth. So my whole body is permeated by this light from God. And then I can do it several times, you know, that's what we do in Qigong. It's really a nice way to it's like a shower of light in a way to do this. But now I'm going to let Martinus say something more. This is a lecture that he had in 1951. It's also been published in the Cosmos paper. And it's really like, I've taken some sentences from this article and maybe making it more like a meditation. So I'm reading it slowly, and then you can maybe read it for yourself, because there are, just to take one sentence is sometimes really good to really not just hear, but also hear and into our whole consciousness. As the belief in the Godhead is not a product of intelligence, it must be an organic talent that is already dwelling within the being. And this we also saw in the symbols. It's already dwelling within us, even if we really don't know how to. But it is organic, he says. It is not possible to perceive or sense God in a form that fits into the dimensions of time and space. The universe is God's body, God's organism. And this is also how he describes it, beyond time and space. But then how shall we... but then he says the universe is God's body, God's organism. So we are actually all the time connected to God through our bodies and through our also inside of us. But this, the God's one I is, and also our I actually is beyond time and space. The universe is filled with movement. There is a plan, a purpose behind the movements, behind the process of creation, a creator, a living being. And we also have this in the Bible, it says, in him we live and move and have our being. He describes it as a giant living being or expression of life that we live in. And this is also what we get when we read the text on the solution to the mystery of life. all these living beings together constitute a certain part of this gigantic being. And this symbol, life unit, in the principle of life units, living being and living being and living beings, in us also. And we exist actually as a living being. Our organs, our cells, our atoms, but then it goes further down, down, endlessly, but it goes also endlessly up. So we live in the earth and the earth in the solar system, so we are also part of the galaxy we live in. Everything is there, and that it looks like some are smaller and some are bigger is also one of these principles that are the basic principle of God's structure, maybe, to have this perspective. When we look at something that's very close to us, we can see it big. When it's farther away, it gets smaller and smaller, or the other way around. If we look up into the Milky Way, it also looks really big. But we all have actually the same size. All of us are experiencing life in the mesocosmos. But the way it's organized here makes it possible for us, because we don't have this body if we don't have the organs who are alive and the cells and so on. We are all dependent both on the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. This is one way of showing it. And this is another way, a Tibetan world picture, where it's instead of circles, it's triangles in triangles in triangles and so on. It goes also on forever. So this is something many through the ages have this feeling that we are somehow part of everything. It has been known more or less in ancient times also. We go on with this article. We exist in our own organism as an eye. Our eye notices in the form of pain and as quick as lightning if our organism is injured and damaged. The eye will therefore act as a providence to the microbeings in its organism. And I had a very unusual experience once here in Klint in the 90s. Some of you have heard it before. We were going away to a place around here where you could pick cherries at that time. And you would have a ladder like this and climb up, and then you could pick the cherries from the tree. And I was standing there picking, and it was so wonderful because you could eat at the same time. But suddenly my ladder started to move, and I came down like this, and my leg, blood, and I'm very delicate to blood. I almost fainted, but something happened. I suddenly looked down there, and what I saw a lot of white ambulances with a red cross on them, and a lot of stretchers. They were carrying people who were wounded, and I saw this, and I felt so sorry for them. I just hurt so much. How could this have happened? Because I wasn't really careful about how I had put the ladder. And the thing is, I didn't faint, although I usually do that when I see too much blood. I even saw the white bone here. And when we went back, I put my hands around it in the car, and I was amazed. I had no pain. Actually, I didn't feel any pain. And somehow this has never happened again to me. So it's something very unusual. But somehow, and how could I see white ambulances with a red cross? We don't have that anymore. So it must be something that is in my mind from earlier lives, I guess. But that was a good way to be aware of how we are a providence for the microbeings in our organism. He goes on here, and he says, so how can the acknowledgement of a Godhead become a personal relationship between every single individual and the Godhead? And this is maybe because I was now the Godhead for my universe. So this is also how God can hear all our, when we cry and cry for help and are suffering. It can also be a personal relationship, even if we don't know where God is or how we connect, but that's what we are trying to get more and more into contact. Every single individual can have a personal relationship with the Godhead. It sounds like it's a lot of work for the Godhead all the time. But here is a bit more of this. Whatever we register as unpleasant, a pain, for example, is the same as the states of physical and mental wretchedness of the micro beings in the area that is ill. And this is what I didn't feel the pain actually, but I felt there, it was really like a big catastrophe down there. And it is the energies in their pain, sorrow and suffering, that we register as a single combined sensation of pain. Because we can't hear them when they scream and scream for help. We can't really hear them because they are so much further down in the spiral cycles. But it's the same combination of energies. When you are in pain and you're suffering, it's a special combination of energies. And this can also come up to me as their Godhead somehow. So that's how we can have the connection, and that's also how the Godhead can have connection with all single beings. There's a little more here. The eye of the macro being registers the sufferings of these beings and sends a stream of cosmic forces to the area of the suffering. So I guess that's what I did. Some cosmic forces came somehow down to them so that they could survive. Well, I don't know, maybe many of them died, but at least I didn't feel the pain. So somehow they could also go through this without too much, I don't know, pain, maybe. He says here these forces are converted partly into physical and partly into mental forces, which means they are converted into thoughts, wisdom, and guidance. So then I was really the Godhead of my universe for these micro beings. And all living beings are the sensory organs of the Godhead, from the primitive to the very highest cosmically intellectual beings. So all these eyes around the whole circle, all of them are the sense, all of us are the sensory organs. So the Godhead feels us all the time through the combination of energies, I guess, because we can't really talk to somebody who is in macrocosmos or in microcosmos, but the energy connection is somehow possible. The Godhead can in reality transfer consciousness and thereby thought directly from itself to absolutely any living being through a corresponding being. That's how he says how an ant can, through an ant he can talk to another ant, and through a living human being he can talk to another human being. So there are all these both physical but also spiritual human beings around us, more developed or like us between two incarnations we can also be spiritual beings, helping the physical beings. And I think maybe we are coming to the end of this article. God is both within and around us. He is our neighbor. He is everywhere and in everything. The quickest way to cosmic consciousness or eternal light is through getting to know him in our enemies. And this he says a lot, very often in different connections. It's really the most important to see that God is also in our enemies. And even if we don't have so many enemies maybe, but there are still people who maybe not like us, then we also have to work on trying to love also the ones who don't love us, to see God in everybody. And if you've tried it, you know it's quite hard. You have to work a lot to get over this. But then when you manage, it's like a release inside. And then it's somehow you are again more and more connected. We get more and more connected to God's will, maybe you could say. And there is actually one more here. If God were not present in everything and everyone, there would be no life, no manifestation. The experience of life would be a complete impossibility. Death can therefore exist only as an imaginary opposite to our eternal life in God's radiant glory. And this, I think, we can just look at this symbol. You've seen it many times probably, how the light from the Godhead shines through all of the universe, through all of us. It could also be a living being, and it shines, it lights through all the organs, the cells, and so on. And the light has a bit different, it gets a bit darker down here, but it's still always the light of God, even if it can feel like it's very dark. But there is no darkness, actually. Darkness is always the lack of light, but it can never really go out, because then there would be nothing, actually. Yeah, this is one of my favorite symbols, because you can really feel how everything is permeated by the same light somehow, which is also the same love, even if we don't experience it in the same way in different parts of the spiral cycle. And then I want to do one more meditation, maybe even more meditative. We'll see if that is possible. It's another article. It's also a lecture Martinus had in 1942, really early. The true relationship to God. And there he says it right out like this: behind your physical organism there is something totally different, which is really you, which is your I, and that is the Godhead in you. And this maybe takes some time until we can more and more feel it, because it's really something that we can feel in our heart. We can't really do it with our intelligence. It doesn't really do it. But it's more like getting it into our heart. I've also just picked some sentences here. The true relationship to God is the same as human beings tuning into the fact that their entire surroundings are the Godhead. And he has said it in so many ways, and he says it over and over again, and we forget it over and over again. But this is also something we can practice. Like me, I can now somehow imagine I am surrounded by God everywhere here, and also in the back, and also where Arense sits back there. I meet God all the time here inside of me, even in my shirt and my trousers and my shoes. And when we go out, this is what I've practiced a lot this week in the nature. It's so nice to just look at every tree and every flower and every grass. So, I'm meeting God here. And God is also here, and also in this little blackbird jumping around in our garden. So this, you hear that my voice changes a little when I tell you about this, because it's really so deep in the heart somehow, this feeling that we are surrounded by the Godhead everywhere, all the time. And we need to understand that what surrounds us is one single vast blazing ocean of light, an ocean of willpower, of caresses from the Godhead. The blazing ocean of light, and an ocean of willpower. And I thought this line of caresses from the Godhead, that everything that I experience is actually a way for God to caress and to make it, yeah, it's okay. And even if it's difficult, it's okay. Everything that comes to us is something that God wants to help us to grow, to become more and more one with God. And to have this feeling also changes the way you meet things in life. And then suddenly you forget it again, but then you start to think about it again, maybe. So we have to somehow remember these things all the time. And this is also something to have in us. All our fellow beings are a kind of living answer from the Godhead. So everything that we give out, even a thought and just maybe a little like this, everything comes back as an answer from the Godhead. The karma, the principle of karma, that everything that goes out comes back again. So everything that we meet is really an answer. And even if we haven't asked a question, the answers come all the time. And then he goes on to understand these answers correctly is a pleasure. If we really can get into this, now this is what God is telling me, then it can maybe after a while, after we have practiced, more and more become a pleasure, because then we feel more connected to God. God is talking to me all the time through everybody I meet, actually. And then it can go to arrive at the point where one experiences this pleasure all the time is the true intention of your life, he says. So to all the time have this feeling of enjoying, feel the pleasure of everything that we meet, is the true intention of our life. So we have some things to work on there. And I also thought it's always so difficult to describe these things in words. And I think maybe poetic texts and music and in nature, it's easier somehow to try to describe this feeling of being connected. And this is one way maybe. Suddenly you are so close, just outside my closed eyelids, but also behind my face. In the dark night you shine. So this is maybe something that we can feel sometimes sitting and being inside, but also feeling the closeness from outside and inside, like behind the face somehow. Now, this is one way to try to describe. And then I've found an author, a Norwegian author, John Fosse. John Fosse, he got the Nobel Prize for Literature 2 years ago. And one of his big books, Septology, is a book in 7 parts. And he just writes and writes and writes and writes. He never has a dot. Maybe some of these little things, but it just go on. It's like coming into his thought world. And in this book, he describes a painter. His name is Asle, and he's an artist. He paints pictures and he thinks a lot. And so we can, with his text, get into this the thought world of this painter. And I wrote it down here so you can also read. I'll read it slowly. I wanted to paint just so that I could say something that couldn't be said any other way. Yes, to paint an absent presence. So how do you paint that? Well, and finally all the paintings I've painted are connected and make up a single picture, I think. It's like there's a picture somewhere or other inside me that's my innermost picture that I try again and again to paint. And the closer I get to that picture, the better the picture I've painted is. But the innermost picture isn't actually a picture, of course, because the innermost picture doesn't exist. It just is in a way, without existing. It is, but it doesn't exist, and somehow it is as if the picture that isn't a picture sort of leads all the other pictures and pulls them in, kind of, I think. But maybe I've now painted everything I can paint from this innermost picture of mine. I think maybe I've now, in a way, entered into this innermost picture and thereby destroyed it. I think, but this going into your innermost picture, yes, seeing it, well, that's probably the same thing as dying. I think, yes, maybe it's the same thing as seeing God. And this was the last picture. Thank you.